The engine is already running. It has been running for 11 minutes, which is long enough to matter, but not long enough to explain if someone asks. You calculated that before you got here, the same way you calculated everything else about tonight. The route, the timing, the weight of what's in the back of the car you don't yet have, but will in approximately 6 minutes if everything goes the way it's supposed to go. In there, 4 people are robbing the most secure private vault in the Western Hemisphere. You are out here. And right now, a police cruiser has just turned onto the street and parked 40 feet ahead of you. No lights, no urgency, just sitting there. And you have 8 seconds to decide whether that's nothing or whether it's the thing that unravels everything. You don't move. That's the first decision, and it's the right one, because moving is what guilty people do. You sit with both hands loose on the wheel, engine idling, looking like someone who was waiting for someone who is taking slightly too long, which is the most unremarkable thing a person can do on a city street at night. Inside the vault, 4 people are being extraordinary. Out here, you are being boring. 6 weeks ago, you didn't know any of those 4 people. You were in a diner eating eggs you weren't particularly hungry for when a man you'd never met sat across from you and slid a folder across the table without saying a word. You opened it, you looked at the number at the bottom of the first page, and you finished your coffee before you said anything, because you are not the kind of person who reacts to numbers out loud in public. The number was enough to disappear on, not a metaphor. Literally enough to change your name, move somewhere warm, and spend the rest of your life without a single outstanding problem. That's what was in the folder. And here you are. They chose you for your patience, not your nerve. That's what the woman who runs the operation told you at the first meeting, which she said in a way that made patience sound more dangerous than nerve. And after 4 weeks of preparation, you understood what she meant. You spent those 4 weeks driving. Not practicing the route, you drove the route too, 7 times at different hours, but just driving around the city, getting the feel of how it breathes at night, where it narrows, where the lights run long, which streets flood when it rains, which intersections have cameras that actually work, and which ones are blinking uselessly at nobody. You changed the tires yourself, you filled the tank yourself. The company belongs to a company that belongs to another company, and by the time anyone traces the registration, it will be somewhere cold and dark, and they will be looking in the wrong direction entirely. The job is supposed to take 22 minutes. The woman who told you this said it in the tone of someone who has never been surprised by an outcome, which is either confidence or an act, and you spent 2 weeks trying to figure out which one it was before deciding it didn't matter. 22 minutes, she said. If you don't see them in 25, leave. You are at minute 16. The cruiser hasn't moved. The officer inside hasn't gotten out. You're telling yourself this is nothing because the alternative is something you can't afford to be thinking about for another 6 minutes while you sit here looking like the most patient man in the world. Your phone vibrates once, coming out early, which means either they finished ahead of schedule, possible, this team is exceptional, or something changed inside and they're cutting it short, which is a word that makes the muscles across your shoulders pull tight, because cutting it short is the kind of language that lives right next to the word improvising, and improvising is what happens when preparation stops being sufficient. They come out of a service entrance to your left, 4 of them, moving at the exact right speed. Fast enough to mean business, slow enough not to mean anything to anyone watching from a distance. One of them has something under a jacket that the jacket is doing an imperfect job of concealing. One of them has a cut above the eyebrow. You don't ask. They're in the car in 11 seconds. You're moving in 12, and you pull away from the curb at precisely the speed of someone who has somewhere to be but nowhere to rush to, which is the finest distinction you've ever had to maintain in your life, and you maintain it perfectly. 2 blocks away, you take the turn onto Route B, which you chose over Route A the moment you saw the cruiser, because Route B is 2 minutes longer and completely clean, and 2 minutes is nothing compared to what the alternative costs. The road opens up ahead of you, straight and empty, and for the first time since minute 11, you let yourself breathe. Someone in the back seat says a number. The take. You don't react because you are not the kind of person who reacts and because the number is real and large, and reacting to it right now would be the most expensive emotion you've ever had. 4 hours later, you're alone in a hotel room you booked under a name that isn't yours. The car is gone, the team is dispersed, each of them following a protocol you all agreed to and none of you will deviate from, because more heists fall apart in the first 48 hours than in the planning. And the reason is always the same. Someone does something human when they should be doing something cold. You are not going to do something human. You are going to order room service and eat it and sleep because tomorrow you have to look like someone with absolutely no reason to be sleeping this well. And the only way to do that convincingly is to actually sleep this well. The news is already running the story, a graphic of the building, the word unprecedented used with the controlled fury of people who have been trained not to say humiliated. You watch it for a few minutes and then you turn it off, not because it makes you nervous, but because there's nothing in it you don't already know. And you have a rule about filling your head with things you already know. It wastes space you might need later. 6 months pass the way 6 months pass when you are being careful. Slowly at first, then with a kind of grinding normalcy that is its own kind of tension. Because normal feels suspicious when you know what's underneath it. The investigation finds its first dead ends, which is when investigators get creative or desperate. And the ones on this case are both, which means they're loud and thorough and pointed in 3 directions at once. None of those directions is yours. You checked. You keep checking. At the 6-month mark, you access the accounts. Everything is there. You sit with the number for about 20 minutes, which is the right amount of time. Long enough to understand it, short enough not to let it become something that changes how you move through a room. Then you start moving it the way your money guy described. Slowly and in pieces, through structures so clean they're boring, which is exactly what you want them to be. Boring is the goal. Boring is the whole plan. Boring is what $1 billion looks like when it's done right. The thing nobody tells you is that the hardest moment isn't outside the vault, watching a police cruiser do nothing in the dark. The hardest moment is the hotel room afterward. The silence, the understanding that you did it and that you can never tell anyone, and that the rest of your life begins right now, in a room with a television and a minibar and a view of a parking structure. You are the only audience for what just happened. That's the trade, the full trade, not the number. This, the silence, the permanent, careful quiet of a life that has to look like something it isn't. On balance, you'd make it again. Probably. You think so. Most mornings you think so. You still check the rearview mirror when it isn't necessary. You still count exits when you walk into a restaurant. Somewhere, right now, there's a man sitting down in a diner, sliding a folder across a table to someone with the right kind of face and the right kind of patience. And that person is going to finish their coffee before they say anything, because that's how this starts. That's always how this starts.